Welcome to another special edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the tragic loss of Air India Flight 171. I'm Geoffrey Thomas and delighted to say, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Frankfurt, Germany. Good morning to you, Richard.
And good afternoon to Perth, Australia. Hi, Geoffrey.
Thank you. So, viewers, this episode is Run and Cut Off. On a Boeing 7878, if you have a one-engine operative OEI after V1, you can still take off. The question is, what happens if at 300 feet above ground level, you select the fuel switch on the wrong engine to the cutoff position? If you accidentally move the fuel control switch on the wrong engine to cut off at 300 feet, AGL in a 787-8, what happens is critical and can be catastrophic. Here's why. We're showing you a screenshot now of the Boeing 787 run and cut-off switches. In the center, you can see the throttle levers, and just below you'll see the two fuel switches. Richard, is it standard operating procedure to cut off the fuel in a one-engine inoperative takeoff?
Well, that's a very critical question because it is not standard operating procedure to immediately cut off the fuel to an inoperative engine that failed on takeoff. If an engine fails after V1, the standard procedure is to continue the takeoff, climb to a safe altitude, typically a minimum of 800 feet above ground level. You level off and you perform the engine failure slash shutdown checklist. The fuel control switch is only moved to the cutoff position when you have run that engine shutdown checklist and verified, number one, that the engine has failed or is severely damaged, and number two, the engine is not needed for immediate flight safety. And as you said, on a Boeing 787-8, if you have an OEI after V1, you can still take off quite happily.
So what happens if at 300 feet above ground level, you still decide to select the fuel switch on the wrong engine to the cutoff position?
The short answer is you wouldn't do that without running the engine shutdown checklist. At 300 feet, it's critical. You don't have enough altitude. It takes 30 to 60 seconds to restart an engine, so it could easily be catastrophic.
But this changes, though, if there's an engine fire warning, does it not?
Absolutely. A fire warning in an engine is what they call a memory item procedure, and it requires immediate action. So a pilot will maintain aircraft control and continue the climb. And when he gets to an appropriate safe altitude, typically between 400 and 800 feet above ground level, they will run the engine fire severe damage memory item procedure. So from memory, a pilot will say thrust lever on the affected engine to idle, check. Fuel control switch on the affected engine to cut off, check. Fire switch affected engine, pull, check. And if the fire indication persists, then you rotate the fire switch to discharge bottle A, you wait, and if it's still needed, you then turn it to discharge bottle B.
We probably should inform the viewers as well, Richard, that those switches are actually guarded by a couple of guards, and then also you have to actually lift them before you move them. So it's not something you can easily knock by accident.
Yeah, so perhaps we should show the screenshot again.
We'll do that.
Both of the switches, you have to lift to move. The fuel cutoff but also the fire switches are not switches that you just brush against and can accidentally trigger.
Mm. So you'll still fly the aircraft first. That means check your pitch, airspeed, and select gear up. As soon as climb is stabilized and crew workload permits, you begin the engine fire memory items, including fuel, control, switch to cut off. What are the immediate consequences if you shut down the only operating engine?
Yeah, well, you've got one engine already inoperative during rollout or the initial climb out. Um, that action of shutting down the fuel on the good engine, uh, that results in a dual engine failure. You lose all thrust. With both engines shut down, the aircraft will begin to descend uh, rapidly, unless, of course, immediate recovery actions are taken. You'll have multiple warnings on the ICAS display: engine fail, left, right, engine shutdown, engine fuel control switch cut off, engine auto start, left, right. Then the electrical and hydraulic system messages will flood in because those systems are powered by the engine. So you'll have electrical bus left, right, electrical generator left, right, off, hydraulic pressure system C failure, C meaning center hydraulic system pressure below the normal operating threshold. If the autopilot was not engaged, but if it was, it would disengage because you're in a rapid power loss and unstable conditions, which would then mean more messages. The rat would deploy. That's another message, rat deployed. You will, if you selected gear up, you would then get a gear disagree caution because the gear doesn't move as commanded. So it's a nightmare scenario.
So this scenario is extremely dangerous.
Yeah, at 300 feet, there's very little altitude, which means very little time to diagnose the situation and very little time to restart the engine. You already have flaps 5. You have the landing gear extended and it won't retract. You have the rat deployed. So this all increases drag on the aircraft. And restarting a GE engine in flight typically takes 30 to 60 seconds under ideal conditions.
But the pilots would not try to restart an engine that is damaged.
Exactly, and that's a very important point. Um, it is irrelevant whether the damage is caused by fire, overheating, blades or shafts or bearing, mechanical failure, bird strike, fuel contamination, abnormal vibration, a FADEC malfunction, maintenance error, or anything else. You don't ask the question, what was causing it? You just assess by running the engine shutdown procedure, and you verify that the engine is severely damaged and not needed for flight. If the engine is damaged, then you do not try a restart. You shut it down safely. In episode 133, we discussed the difference between a catastrophic and a benign engine failure. If the failure was benign, then you would try to restart the engine. We defined a benign failure as, for example, a momentary fuel interruption or a compressor stall or bird ingestion that was not causing damage, or an electronic fault, or a sensor issue, or a software glitch. That kind of thing you would determine is benign, and you would restart the engine. Shutting off the wrong fuel switch is something which is immediately obvious as benign. So you would immediately start the APU and restart the engine. If you could do it by windmilling, if you had enough airspeed, that would be even quicker. Otherwise, the aircraft is likely to impact terrain before the restart completes, even if there is exceptional crew coordination because you have such a small altitude buffer left and little time to respond.
So, what chance did the crew have in this scenario?
Well, if the crew immediately identified the mistake and shutting off the wrong fuel, and they confirmed the shutdown was accidental and not a second failure, which I think they could do within a split second, probably, they would then move the fuel control switch back to run. That takes another second. Attempt a windmill relight if airspeed and conditions permit. They would, at the same time, start the APU. At the same time, the rat would be deployed manually if it hadn't already been deployed automatically. You would obviously need the APU and the rat to maintain the essential systems and backup power and hydraulics. You pitch for the best glide attitude. Uh, so if no relight is possible, you maximize the glide. You follow the engine out glide profile, maximize your time for recovery, and you prepare for an emergency landing.
Now, the sole survivor reported the engine revving in the final moments. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is. And it would appear that the engine power was restored. Engines don't rev unless the engine power is restored. So, on the other hand, it was clearly too late to avoid a crash.
So, we're not saying this happened. It's another possible scenario that we are investigating. Do you agree, Richard?
Yeah, we must underline that, and I absolutely agree with you. This is one of our possible scenarios. Regular viewers will know we've been through a number of different scenarios. So we're not saying that this is what actually happened. What we're saying is if something like this happened, then these are the consequences, and this is what the pilots would be doing. Some viewers do not like that we're considering different scenarios and say, why don't you just wait until the report comes out? Well, I disagree, and I think it is quite scientific to have a hypothesis. And then when the report comes out, you can, get more information and test your hypothesis. Accidentally shutting down the wrong engine after V1, and especially at around 300 feet above ground level, is a catastrophic error. It leads to a dual engine failure at low altitude with very limited recovery options. It can result in a crash quite clearly, unless you have a miracle level recovery, which in this case didn't happen. And the scenario is one reason why positive engine identification and strict checklist discipline is absolutely critical during an engine failure on takeoff.
Mm. So, Richard, we know that the AAIB India preliminary report has been written, and a draft is now with the Minister of Civil Aviation and due to be released, I think, on Friday.
Yeah, and many viewers commented with that information as well yesterday. We also reported it online, quoting Reuters, and there are several other reputable press who've confirmed that. So we're expecting the report to be released on Friday. The report is currently confidential, and the minister will decide if it is released publicly and whether that is released in full or only in part publicly. There's been several fake leaked versions of that report, which have circulated, and we have debunked a number of them. We emphasize that no official version is publicly available yet. So if you have seen a version, it is quite likely it's one of these fake reports, and please ignore it.
Yeah, there's two giveaways. First of all, they got the passenger number wrong, and the second thing they say is there was torrential rain on pushback. I think that's common to all those three or four reports. Um, so, Richard, what do you expect to see in the report on Friday?
Well, we know what we expect to see, and we know also what we do not expect to see in the report. So, you're not going to have everything that you want to know, dear viewer. Um, we expect a review of the key initial findings. So, the takeoff sequence, the critical system failures, the black box and data recovery. We also know that they have done flight simulations. So, three India 787 trainers replicated possible electrical failure scenarios in the simulators in Mumbai, but they were apparently not able to replicate the crash conditions. We know also that the wreckage has been recovered to a hangar and a 3D reconstruction is in progress. So there might be some information on that and the progress made so far. But we do not expect any formal conclusions regarding a human factors or configuration error, and certainly not any conclusions on a possible pilot error. So don't hold your breath on that one.
Mm.
I expect we will know quite a bit more than we do today, and we will analyze that and report on it in due course. But it's a preliminary report. It's not the final report. So that'll take several months longer. The civil aviation minister mentioned 3 months. I think that's quite quick. ICAO mentioned a report after 12 months. That's very realistic. But there are accidents or disappearances like MH370, and after 11 years, we still don't know. So, we'll see how it goes.
I don't expect any adverse findings against Boeing or General Electric because there's been no emergency ADs issued and they are party to this investigation. So if there were any clear engine or systems failures, we would have known about them virtually straight away.
Yeah. And we've said all along that this is a complex situation. There's probably multiple issues. The scenario we've just gone through, again, is multiple issues all happening at the same time, an absolute frightening nightmare situation for an outsider. But pilots have all of these checklists, and many of the critical ones are memory checklists. So they know, and they're trained, highly trained, very proficient to handle a situation. But on the other hand, in this scenario, we've just pointed out, everything was happening at once, and
Mm.
there wasn't enough altitude or enough airspeed to handle it.
But they certainly should have been having some thrust because of that earlier episode we did on the glide from that particular point, the highest altitude point to the impact point. thrust of some kind must have been delivered.
Yeah, we've talked in previous episodes about an intermittent thrust scenario. So, for
Mm,
example, if you have one engine inoperative on takeoff, that will reduce the thrust and the other engine will take over and supply perfectly adequate thrust for a takeoff. If you have a flame out on the second good engine, then you will try to relight it so the thrust would die back on the second good engine. But as you restart it, the thrust would come back and the engine would rev up. And it's all a question of timing.
mm,
And this flight from rotation to crash lasted no longer than 32 seconds.
mm.
So that was very little time to be able to react and handle the situation.
Yeah. So, viewers, that's all we have time for today. We're going to be covering the Air India tragic crash tomorrow. And then on Friday, when the report comes out, we're going to be monitoring that through the day. And our plan is that we will bring you the report as soon as it comes out. And then later in the day, we will then do a more comprehensive analysis of what it means, depending on how much detail we get. So that's the plan. So, Richard, thank you very much indeed for all the work you've done on this today. It's really absolutely fascinating. And we must stress again, this is a scenario. This is not in any way part of the report. It's just a scenario from all the available facts that we have. Would that be correct, Richard?
That's correct. So,
Mm.
and we'll continue to look at other scenarios too,
Mm.
despite some viewers not liking that.
Mm. So, viewers, please subscribe to us. Please like us. Please keep those comments coming. We love them. We love your support. And please do keep those great questions coming. They're really outstanding. And please do tune in tomorrow. Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.